Hey guys, welcome back. In the last chapter, we have discussed about virtual networks and subnets, and we have created both of them in Azure. In this chapter, we'll be focusing on configuring virtual network peering as well as public IP addresses. Alright, so let's move on to the whiteboard. Alright, let's assume we have a virtual network. Let's call it V1, and then we have another virtual network, and let's call it V2. Let's assume we have the internal IP address of 192.168.0.0/16, and let's assume it also has the same thing. As these are two different virtual networks, it's possible for both of them to have the same internal IP addresses, that is 192.168.0.0/16. What virtual network peering is, we actually connect both of them so that they act as a single virtual network. That is, the VMs inside this virtual network can communicate to the VMs inside this virtual network directly without going through the internet traffic. This can be avoided. But for this to happen, say for example, this one first VM was allocated an IP address of 192.168.1.1, and this second VM was allocated an IP address of 192.168.1.1. Now, or 1.2 basically. When this VM will refer this VM using this IP address, it doesn't go out of this VNet because this IP address also exists here. So this is a problem over here. So for virtual network peering to happen, it's necessary that both of these IP addresses do not overlap. So this is one of the primary, important note that we need to have before we create VNets in an organization or before we peer them. So this is a very important note, like both of them should not be having the same IP addresses. So let's just remove that part and let's create one more thing that can be 10.0.0.0/16, and then we can have 10.0.0.1. So in this case, if this VM is now referring this IP address, that directly goes within the peered connection to this network. And the advantage of virtual network peering is the traffic here travels over Microsoft backbone and doesn't enter internet. So this way it is more secure, and you know when it comes to traffic over internet, it is susceptible to multiple attacks, that is attacks via the attacks on the data on transit. So here we can eliminate that. We can also have encryption over here, but most of the cases this is not required because the whole traffic is going within the Azure backbone network. Now let's implement that and see how virtual network peering actually helps us in communicating between two virtual networks. In the previous lecture, we have created a network, that is network 1. I haven't deleted it because it doesn't incur any cost. So to visualize network peering, we need two networks. Uh, Let me create another one. We can create both of them in one resource group as well. For easy understanding, I'm doing it in the other one. Okay, if you go to IP addresses, Azure is by default giving us this one. This is not overlapping with the other one, so that's fine. Um, or let's do this thing. We can visually see that it's not possible to peer both of them. Yeah, here if you see address space, this one overlaps with the address space of network 1. Virtual networks with overlapping address cannot be peered. So this is clear and it's clearly understood from here. So let's move on to the default one to see this. Yeah. So this shouldn't take more than a minute. I think it should be done by now. Yeah, it's done. So now if we take a look at the virtual networks, we should be seeing a couple of them. So yeah, it's visible. So to pair both of them, we can actually go into any one of the network, be it network 1 or network 2, and go to settings. Here you can see pairings, and we can add a new pairing, and then so let's give it a name. Uh, so network 1 to network 2. I'll let you know why I have named this like this. And then yeah, we know the virtual network, that is network 2, and we will allow the traffic. So let's leave this discussion to the end of this lecture, and then local virtual network summary. Okay, so this should be network 2 to network 1, and this is network 1 to network 2. All right. So yeah, let's look at these options. Allow network 2 to access network 1. This means if you don't check this one, the traffic coming from network 2 to network 1 would be blocked. So peering can be done bidirectional or single direction, unidirectional. I mean, if you want network 1 only to talk to network 2 but not network 2 to network 1, you can disable this one. Same thing over here, allow network 1 to access network 2, and then allow network 2 to receive forwarded traffic from network 1. This is whenever if a traffic from external source comes to network 1, that can be forwarded to network 2 or not. So using this we can control that one. Allow gateway or route server, this is beyond the scope these two, so, but I'll give you a brief idea about it. So whenever a virtual network has a gateway or route server, whether to allow the traffic forwarded from that or not, and then enable network 2 to use network 1's remote gateway or route server. That is, say network 1 has a remote gateway which has been linked to the on-premise data center. So whenever you don't link every network of Azure to on-premise data center because that incurs so much cost. Instead, what you do is you check this one, that is, you can use network 1, say for example, has a remote gateway. Network 2 can use that to communicate to data center on premises. Currently we don't need it, so I'm disabling it. So that's it. And here we see both remote virtual network as well as local virtual network. What this means is whenever you create a network peering, a peering link will be created on both the networks. So here if you see on virtual network 1, the local network name, that is network 1 to network 2, and then when you go to network 2, the peering would be network 2 to network 1. So this is about network virtual network peering. um, Let me set up okay, let's go ahead and set up how do we test whether these two are able to communicate directly. So let's create a resource. We can, I mean, the details about creating this virtual machine would be explained in the later part of the course, but for now let's just look into this one. Let's give it a name, VMA, and zone 1. I'll just leave everything. I'm selecting the least one. Let me just give a password. I'm just creating with the default settings. Let's just check in which network. Okay, it's part of network 1. Cool. Let's create that. I'll create another machine in network 2 and we'll come back once everything is done. This might take a couple of minutes. So we have two VMs ready. So one important thing is we need to enable the port on 80, that is allowing the traffic on port on 80, because we will be deploying a sample web application in both of them. So the service would be HTTP and it would be allowed. So let's just add them before we face any issues on this. So yeah, it's added. So now yeah, here we have both public IP address as well as private IP address added to the VM. So private IP address is only used for internal communication. Now that I want to log in into this VM to install the web server, I need to use public IP address. So let me just connect to it. So I'm connected to the VMB. So the update is now done. So let's just install Nginx. This should be pretty quick, and it's done. So let's just take the public IP address of the VM and just open it in the browser by just giving it. We should be landing on default Nginx page. Yeah, here it is. So now to distinguish this between the other VM, so let's just go back. Now let's go to /var /www /html. Just enter into the root user, and now index.html. Let's just write this is vmb and let's quickly save it. Yeah, it's done. And then let's restart Nginx server. It's done. So now if we refresh this page, we should see, yeah, this is vmb. Similar thing has been done for the A instance. This is VMA, and we can see VMB is part of peering network, network 2, that has the internal IP address range of 10.0.0.0, and when it comes to VMA, it is part of network 1, which has an IP address of 192.168.0.0. Alright, so now we can access both of them through internet, right? So then we cannot prove any peering capabilities using this. So what we'll do is let's just go to the public IP address of VMA and then disassociate it with VM. So that means now VMA doesn't have any public IP assigned to it. So let's just wait for this to be done. So it's still going on. Meanwhile, let's go to VMB and do the same thing. Yeah. And now it's still going on, but here we don't see any public IP assigned to VMA. So let's try to just refresh this. This shouldn't be resolved to this one because this IP is not assigned now. So yeah, both of them are saved, and now yeah, both of these should not be resolved. So this is what happens when a public IP is not assigned to the VM, but we are still trying to access that. Yeah, the site can't be reached. And now when we try to do access using the private IP, it should also show the same thing. I mean, this keeps on running for some time and then it goes into site can't be reached. All right, so this is from now the both the VMs does not have any internet connectivity, right? Because without public IP address, VMs cannot talk to the internet or internet cannot talk to the VMs. This is clear now. All right, so now let's uh, go into the VMs and see how we can access them. Let's assign the IP address to VM A, because without which we cannot SSH into this one, because even though we need to connect to that to communicate to VM B, we need a public IP address to SSH into that. So I am assigning it back to VMA, but VMB does not have anything. Yeah, VMB does not have anything. Here I am assigning it to VMA. Yeah, VMB does not have anything. So once this is done, let's copy the IP address of VMA. Yeah, IP address, and let's just log in into it. Now we are connected to VMA using the public IP address of VMA. So let's just do a curl for local host, which is equivalent to 127.0.0.1. So that again resolves to VMA, and then again the public IP address, private IP address of VMA, which is I think 4. And no, this is not the thing. It should be 3. Let me just check what is the private IP address of VMA. 2.168.0. I'm sorry, it should be 192.168.0.4. So yeah, this again resolved to VMA, right? So VMA is able to resolve VMA's web server, which is fine. Now VMB does not have a public IP address, I mean associated to it, so we should not be able to connect over the public internet, right? So let's just try the private IP address, which is 0.4. Yeah, we are able to resolve the web server of VMB. This indicates that virtual network peering is working correctly and we are able to communicate to the other network's virtual machines without the public endpoint, right? So this summarizes virtual network peering in Azure. So let's mark an end to this chapter. I thought we could cover public IP address as well, but this chapter seemed to be lengthy enough. So let's cover that in the next lecture. Alright, thank you guys. Thank you for watching.